Okay, I've always missed knowing the hosts of my favorite podcast shows. Maybe this is not your favorite, but I think it makes sense to know where I come from when I interview guests. Today's going to be that one. It's going to be that episode explaining a bit more about me. Hi, Benjamin.
Hello, Jakob.
We're doing an episode that I wish I had other podcasts do.
Yeah.
Which does feel a tiny bit narcissistic, but I'm going to do it anyways. It's an episode about me.
Yeah.
And because the way I come from it, I've been listening to podcasts for so long, and I very often miss out. Who is the narrator? Like, who's this person interviewing other people, and what is the lenses that he uses in order to present this podcast? And I think by now there'll be a lot of episodes out that's also about founders. And I think it would be weird not to tell about my own journey, but also my personal journey, just so you can understand what are the lenses I'm talking about.
I agree.
And the fun thing about you is you've been for the company for around 2 months, but we have very much the same communication style.
Yeah.
We think very alike to some degree.
Yeah.
And therefore, I thought it would be very natural for you to be a part of this interview process, whatever we call it. But first of all, Benjamin, could you just briefly explain who you are, just to set the context of why I've chosen you?
Yeah. I'm coming out of the shadows here a little bit. But So my name is Benjamin. I go by Ben Alexander. I'm an artist and a producer. And I also work at Capella, doing various things. So it's I would say that my passion in life is music, and I've kind of chosen to focus on the music segment and the music industry. And yeah, so hopefully I make good music, and that's pretty much what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And what you're slowly transitioning into in the company is a very central role around the business.
Yeah. So I mean, currently right now I'm kind of sitting as the finance manager. So I'm calculating and breaking numbers and cracking numbers, which is an orthodox thing for maybe an artist to do. But I enjoy it. So yeah. And now we're kind of slowly moving more towards, as you say, a little bit more administrative roles and so forth. And I think that's going to be a very interesting journey.
Yeah. But obviously, I'm going to let you sort of set the scene and ask the questions. But,
yeah, sure.
But Capella right now is a startup in itself. And we have talked a bit about it with some founders episodes, we've called them, where we talked about sort of evaluating our journey and who we are as people with the original founders. But there's, of course, one person who's very central to not only this podcast, but also Capella in general, and that's me. So I would like to give the listeners the opportunity, for those who are interested, to know me a bit more. So how would you approach talking about that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I know you on a personal level to some degree because we have crossed paths. But this is interesting for me as well because I haven't really known you that well, and there's a lot of things that I would like to ask you and kind of figure out, from your journey and so forth. So this will be equally interesting to me as it will hopefully for the listener.
Hopefully.
So one of the things that I'm interested in is, like, first of all, you're from Denmark. And now we're sitting in a studio in Stavanger.
Yeah.
And we're sitting here with Capella, we're sitting here with this podcast and all of these things. First of all, like, why did you come to Stavanger? What led you from Denmark to this place, out of all places?
Well, first of all, the very simple answer is I met a very nice Norwegian girl, and we had a couple of kids, and she had lived in Denmark for 10 years, and her plan was originally just to be there for a couple of years. And then she met me, and she stayed, not just for me, but like part of that was it. But we've always agreed to move back. And for me, that's sort of been scary also because, I've the last 12 years been pretty set on that I want to do music. And Stavanger and Bryne, where we live now, which is a small city out of the countryside, is definitely not famous for music. And it was with a lot of, desperation that I moved here. Like, okay, what's going to happen with my industry and my career? But I came here because of that. But I've also had let's call it a very life with a lot of experiences, so it wasn't so scary. I was pretty sure I was going to figure it out, but I didn't really have any plans of what that would look like.
Yeah. So I mean, kind of starting. You're coming to Stavanger, and you're getting introduced to this city, and you're noticing that there's certain challenges. There are many great things, but there's also certain challenges. As per, for example, like the music industry is not, it's not like universally, it's a huge thing here. So it's a little bit more segmented. How did you kind of start to set up in terms of finding the right people for Capella, coming here with, I don't know if you knew people here from before?
No. Well,
that is a process. That is a little bit of a complicated process.
I think I've always been, let's call it relatively eccentric, and maybe had a poor sense of realism, that I was sort of projecting what could happen in the future as like, absolutely that's going to happen. So when I moved here, I had like sort of this approach that I'm just going to know everyone in the music industry. My first contact with a guy called Stein Bjelland, who's also on this podcast, who's fairly influential in the Norwegian music scene. Yeah. And he sort of introduced me to, I would say, maybe 5 different people. And from there, I was just like, who are they friends with? Like researching websites, who's in the industry. And before I moved here, I think I had 25 digital coffees with different people. Yeah. Just trying to figure out like, who are you? And I think people found it very random. And when I actually moved here, I did something that I think was quite provocative to people. That in hindsight was provocative, is that those 25 industry people that I knew, I invited to a coffee here at Elefant, which is where we're sitting. We have our studios as well, close to our offices. Yeah. And I was like, sat them down and I laid out a 3-year plan for them, what I'm going to do for the city. And like
that's
it's it's not even borderline arrogant. It is arrogant, but I
mean it's ambitious. It depends on how you look at it, but yeah.
And I can't exactly remember what I said, but I sort of paraphrasing myself when I say I believe that Stavanger by 2025 can be one of Norway's new music cities. So that was like a 5-year plan, and then within 3 years I'm going to build collaboration, and people are going to experience the network of music in the city differently. And I've been a piece of that puzzle, but I would say not just because of me, but obviously anything you project into life is not just because of you. But because of that vision, I believe things were put into works that right now, 3 years later, has happened. Stavanger is definitely not up there where it should be, but people are starting dreaming again, they're collaborating, and we've had the opportunity to create a company here where we're pretty much the only company that focuses on commercializing music and actually make a living, and having enough assets that started to make sense on a national scene. So to some degree, I did do what I promised. But I would also say it sort of, to some degree, created a few enemies. Like, who is this weird guy to say that?
Yeah, because that's an interesting thing, because in my life I've traveled a lot, so I've lived certain places. I kind of come out of Norway, both in childhood.
Just make sure your microphone is have enough sound.
Hello.
Just turn it a bit up.
Hello.
It's fine.
Yeah. Do we need to do this again?
No, because it will align itself. I just need to make sure.
Yeah. So I mean, that's interesting that you're saying, because for me, I have a background of traveling a lot. I didn't grow up in Norway in the same sense that most people do. So I grew up in Norway as a child, but later during my teenage years, I was fortunate enough to kind of live certain places around the world. And one of the things that makes it a little bit tricky in Norway when you're coming in and you're trying to create something is obviously the famous Janteloven, in a sense. And to those of you who are listening, maybe some of you have heard of this, but it's kind of like an inside joke in the Scandinavian and socials, where it's like there's this law that's called Janteloven, which basically means that you shouldn't think that you are better than us, in a sense. And it's not like the Norwegian society is based solely on that, not at all, but you can touch upon it sometimes. And so did you feel that?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And it's definitely been a challenge for me. And it's not because I have especially high thoughts about myself, but I do have very big hopes for what I can create. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's definitely been an issue. But the context for that is I grew up in a family where that was lacking, in a sense. They didn't really have any Janteloven in them. And that in their life has also created some issues and problems, I believe. But as an entrepreneur, I think you need to be a bit crazy. I think you need to be a bit delusional about what you can achieve. So I've also been relatively unapologetic about it. I try to be very respectful when it comes to, when sometimes that can be perceived as arrogance. So I try not to steer into that because I am not arrogant. But it can definitely be perceived for it. But as an entrepreneur, you need to speak loud. You need to dream big. You need to proclaim it. You need to, almost manifest it. And that's difficult in Norway. But it's always felt natural to me because of my upbringing and my parents and my brothers are also pretty much like that. So I've sort of accepted that I won't be accepted fully because of it, but I also have a pretty good understanding that if it's something I compromised on, then that would negatively affect the company.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. And I think, I mean, there's a lot of cultural things going on here, and especially when you're coming from a family which you're stating that, didn't necessarily have a lot of that. You were brought up, I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were brought up in an environment where you were more encouraged to probably think bigger or to dream bigger or to be that guy who, wouldn't pay too much attention to the current structures and be like, I want to create new structures. I want to create stuff that's innovative and cool and new and kind of set new foundations and be that guy.
Yeah, and I did grow up with that, but it was a combination of two things. It was a combination of maybe being overly ambitious, and I can tell you a bit about that, how maybe for a couple of generations my family have been overly ambitious. But it's also because that I grew up in a religious context that is, very much, let's call it Pentecostal to some degree, where there's a narrative that you are chosen. That sounds very weird to say, and I believe in that narrative everyone can be chosen, but it's definitely not something like you're encouraged to think about yourself as someone special in God's eyes, and even then that's not something I'm projecting myself into these days as much. If you already have a mindset where you don't have as much Janteloven, that can really take over and say, well, I am special. I'm supposed to do great things. And sort of that religious upbringing has definitely limited the amount of Janteloven I've had. But then also both my mother and my mother's father have been super vocal about stuff in life. My mother's father was a priest who was super vocal in media about religion in the state church, and that had for many years and had some big consequences in his career, and was sort of let's call it overthrown by the state from what he spoke about. And my mom has been a politician and been active in media and news outlets and all that kind of stuff. So come from a family that's been very outspoken about stuff. One of the things that I've chosen to do is I like to be outspoken, but only about specific things that matters to me, and then I'm choosing to be very little outspoken about things that I believe is not my core line of interest. I don't speak a lot about religion. I don't speak a lot about politics because I think that's where my family comes from, and I've seen the good things, but also the very, very many bad things that can come from that, and how distancing it can be from different people.
Yeah. I've noticed that. When you and I had some conversations that there's certain topics, especially politics and religion, that you kind of withdraw a little bit from.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because they are in a sense controversial subjects, and it's also, as you say, it can create a little bit of havoc at times. Yeah,
and then it reserves my opinions for something that matters. So if I would have outspoken opinions about a lot of things, then let me put it the other way. If I only speak about things that really matters, people will listen when I speak. But if I speak too much about too many different things, the weight of what I say is less, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, but I think that's a human thing. But it's okay. So just kind of take me a little bit through here. Okay, so you're coming to Stavanger, you're meeting these people, you're setting it up, you're setting up the meeting here at the Elefant, and you're talking to did you feel, because that meeting in itself is quite interesting, that you're inviting all of these people, it's a very un-Norwegian thing to do.
Yeah, super.
Yeah, because Norwegians, they don't do that. It's all about who you know and all that kind of stuff. So I would say, is it correct if I'm saying that it's more of an American approach, I would say, maybe?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, I very much love the Scandinavian society and all the benefits that comes. But let's call this go-getter mentality, I'm definitely more American.
Yeah. So how did you experience like that there was a positive kind of enforcement when you were sitting at that table from the people, or were they all just like, what are we doing here and who's this guy? And
I would say no.
Yeah.
I would say it was primarily negative, like for the people, but very, very positive for me. So I wouldn't be without it. And what I mean with negative is like the 3 years I've been here and been doing business, I've been a proactive person all the time, which means no one has proactively out of their way reached out to me in order to support my cause. It's only been opposite. And I don't necessarily think it's because that meeting was a bad thing, but it didn't lead to any measurable positive thing per se. But what it did do is it did hold myself accountable to my ambitions, and for me, that's what I needed. Like I can prove them. I don't want to say prove them wrong over time, but I can prove my worth over time, and have people doubt me in the meantime. I have no problem with that.
Yeah. Do you get fueled by that? Like, because some people, you have like characters out there, like, for example, like David Goggins is an interesting character, right? This military guy who's just risen up, and he's all over the social media right now. He's like this he workouts all the time, and he confronts pain, and while he's jogging and doing these insane marathons, he's listening to audio tapes of his haters, okay. Like telling him that he's a piece of shit and he's not worth anything or whatever, and that kind of fuels him to just continue to confront and progress. And some people are wired like that. Would you say that you are kind of like, are you affected by people who work against you in the sense that you start self-doubting, or is it more like, I'm going to prove them wrong? I'm going to, this is actually almost good for me because, yeah.
It's an interesting question, and I can try to give an answer, but it's maybe a bit complicated.
Yeah, it's very personal. It's very personal.
But I'll definitely answer it. I think one of the things that really matters to me is achievement and admiration. And that sounds super weird to say, but I come from a childhood where I was definitely not the popular one, and was definitely told that by many kids. And also maybe being overly sensitive, and also maybe my family not understanding that to a big degree. I've always felt like the odd one out. Always. Still do to this very day. What I did perceive that as when I was a kid as a very negative thing. I've really turned around to see that as a super positive thing. But in the process of still being obsessed about achievement and acknowledgement and admiration to some sense, I do thrive on being the underdog, because by being the underdog and then winning at something, that is achievement itself. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's not so much about people's opinions. It's more recognizing how they perceive me now, and at what point people will perceive me different. And it's not the goal, it's the process of doing that. So I get fueled by people's doubt about me, not as a positive or negative thing, but more as an understanding of where do they think I am now. And then I can use that as, okay, so what do I need to do in order to get the next step in their eyes? But it's super contradictory, because I don't really also put my self-worth on what they think, but I use them as an indicator towards myself where I'm actually am and where I think I am. Because the way that I work in general is I always have my head in the future. And one of the things that I believe that gives me a lot of drive is I don't perceive myself as the person I am now. I perceive myself the person I know I will be in the future and I'm heading towards. And
But just if I can pick your brain a little bit about that precise statement, for example, which is okay. So you're kind of living in the future, which is, I would say it's a more normal thing among entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Because we're willing to, I would say, approach the delayed gratification.
Yeah.
In the sense that we suffer now and live tomorrow, in a sense. But my question is, do you has that created some challenges for you, in the sense that you're always kind of like looking forward to or working towards the greater things, and maybe not understanding what's going on right in front of you here and now?
Yeah. No, it's there's so many challenges.
Yeah.
100%, both on the personal life and work context. So within work, living in the future, if you're good enough at building something, you can have people in your work life that can compensate a bit for you living in the clouds in the future, which drives momentum, by the way. But you can't ignore the present. And, Capella to now have, to some degree, prioritized future over present, which brings its complications. What we're working on right now is, because we have more money, we have more revenue, have more structure and understanding, we're bringing in people like yourself, where your job is being in the present. And, Taj Khan, who's a general manager, his job is being in the past and the present. What have we done, and what are we doing right now to change, and then bring it towards the future goal that I have created, together with a lot of other clever people. So it's manageable in work life. In private, it's definitely harder. And I think me and my wife, who's been together for 10 years now, are continuously working on my issues of living in the future. I think she also loves me because I am like that, but there's a lot of present problems with not necessarily per default being present in the present, and I need to force myself into it, but I forget it really, really quickly.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting thing, and in a sense, I can relate to it, because it's if you are in a creative space as well, if you are a creative and you have that mindset where it's like, I want to do big things, you're not sitting there spending your time and focus and energy on what's the current challenge today. No. You're thinking, all of these, like you're thinking that this is the place that I want to get in 5 years, in 6 years, that's what I want to be. If I drop the ball, maybe there or and right in front of me there, in the big picture, it doesn't matter. And it is a challenging thing, because you have to have some sort of attention span towards the present, because without the present, you're not going to get into the future.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of a challenge. But a little bit back to what you were saying regarding the achievement and the kind of the recognition for your work and so forth. Can you give me like a story in Capella's story where you felt that, where you had some sense of like, now I did something cool and I can feel it?
Yeah, well, good question, but that's an issue with me, is I never really get there.
Oh, I see. You're always chasing the carrot.
Always chasing the carrot, but that's how it is. Like, I never really see my achievements. I can feel a small win for a couple of days, and that's it.
That's kind of what I'm asking for.
But no, not really. Like, and I recognize that I never really get satisfied with my results. But what I've done, I've sort of accepted that premise. And then what I've spent the last, I would say, 2 years on, is just enjoying the journey in itself. Because I know that I would never get the gratification that I need in order to be happy because of the achievements, even though it sounds very, opposite of what I just said 10 minutes ago. So I crave the achievement, I crave the recognition, but also know when I get it, I can't hold on to it. So it's like chasing something, and then when I get it, I don't appreciate it anymore.
No,
so I'm
yeah.
focusing right now on how do I get as much joy from the journey, and sort of ignore that part of my personality that craves achievement.
Yeah.
To some degree,
but it makes sense. It makes sense because we can't really like if we're that's the thing again, like what actually makes you happy in a sense, because if you're satisfied with a little bit of recognition and a little bit of achievement, you're not thinking big enough. You're not, because then you're satisfied with that. And a lot, and
as an entrepreneur,
as an entrepreneur,
yeah.
But it's like and these where you have like different people and different personalities and so forth, and what actually motivates people and actually creates happiness and satisfaction for them. But at least I would assume or interpret that a person like yourself would feel like, it's the chase of perfection, and that chase of the perfection that is the perfection in itself, in a way that you're never going to get fully satisfied in a sense, which is a challenge, but it's also the drive that makes you keep pushing.
And no, I agree. And for me, perfection is not the right word, but for me, impact is the right word. But yeah, it's the same thing, because I definitely think you're probably closer to perfectionist than I am.
Well, within certain things.
Yeah, within certain things. Yeah.
Like the stuff that I'm passionate about, I definitely am. But I've also gotten some stress from my girl as well regarding this, because it's like, in some aspects, for example, like at home, I have my home studio where I have all my music equipment and my computers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm very strict about like no one can get close to that space except for me.
Yeah.
Can't even clean around it. I have to clean it because I'm so afraid that something is going to happen and some cable is going to do this or that, and then the files are gone and all that stuff. So I have these like small little OCD things regarding that particular space, but everything else, when it comes to like stress and pressure and chaos, I don't get stressed out about it.
Yeah.
But
the things you're saying there is absolutely why I think, I know an entrepreneur like me needs people who have those aspects of them, because I would say I'm probably the opposite of a perfectionist. I neglect perfection, and it's not because I have a mentality that's good enough. It's more like, well, that's good enough for me to take the next step, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's a very pragmatic approach to life and to building business, but reality is that some things need to be perfect, and something needs to be the best in order to the best communication we need to deliver our clients when we do a production. Good enough is not good enough. Then you need to be perfect in order to have consistent flow of clients and recurring revenue. But
also to have impact.
Yeah, but it's not my job to make that happen, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. But okay, so just because. Again, I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about like the real stories here.
Yeah, and go for it.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, so you're done with this table, and you're then starting to progress. How did you find the people for Capella and sought them out and were like, these are the people that I want to work with? And you don't necessarily have to go all the way back to the early beginnings, but like, what are you looking for in personalities and in people when you are bringing them onto like the Capella ship, in a sense?
I think looking back of it, I can tell you what we were looking for, but the reality of the moment was that just whoever wanted to join the cause of building business in Stavanger were welcome, and we burned on us that many times. Like there's a lot of people that were like, okay, you want to help building this? Come, hang out at the office, help us, be in association with us, and I would say 5, 6, 7 people along that journey has definitely been wrong for us and done damage to our brand. And we've probably done damage to them. So I wish I could say that there's been a plan. There hasn't. I think the approach we've had is much more like, let's just do whatever we think is right and then learn from our mistakes. So there hasn't been this very strategic set out journey like how to do it, and we definitely do that more now. But I would say that it's almost coincidental that Capella right now is becoming something that could be amazing. It's not something that was from the get-go. And when I moved here to Stavanger, I had a company called Mantic Music Group that I still work with. That's sort of right now sort of personally, with my attention part a bit to the side because of what's happening at Capella. Well, my plan was focusing my energy on that, and this Capella thing was just something on the side, a hobby thing to help build Stavanger, because I knew most likely I'm going to live for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So let me at least do my part for building up a artist representation side of the business.
Yeah, yeah, cool. But it's like, okay, so Ben, I mean, how Capella is doing right now is definitely something that I would say. I mean, even though I started just a short while ago, I have followed Capella outside, and you know this because we have crossed paths several times in various situations. And as an outsider, and as well, not even an outsider now, but as an outsider that I was, I had heard of you guys and heard positive things out there, you know. And it's very, I think it's because it's very, when you're working within a company that has a big vision, you can get kind of incubated in a sense. You can get like tunnel vision, and you're not really understanding and like how are we viewed outside of these office spaces? How are people? What do people know about us? Do they know what we do? Do they know who we are? All that stuff.
But I think as much there's also been a lot of negative things about us.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard them myself because I don't live in the city. I live like half an hour outside the city. But it's been, there's been positive things, but there's also been equally negative things because our focus has never been controlling a narrative. Maybe that a bit more now. But it's been a result of just doing whatever felt right in the moment.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of things wrong. I think one of the things that we did is in the start we overcommitted emotionally to artists, not necessarily in what we needed to do for them, but like how present we were, and couldn't sustain that over time. And the artists misunderstood what our actual role was.
Yeah.
I think there's also a lot of people who maybe in the process have maybe been very ungrateful, like us, without taking out salary for 2 years, like pouring our hearts into a project, and then if things are not performing according to what we hoped, they're like, well, freak you guys. And I think that's been tough. So we haven't had an active pursuit of controlling the narrative. So some people have spoken nicely about us. Some people have spoken poorly about us. And I think it's a result of not protecting a brand, but we were never in a position before now to even work with it.
No, but I again, like, coming into this company, I have understood that these have been challenges. But before I got into it, I didn't hear a lot of bad stuff. I really didn't. It might have been the people that I were with and all that stuff, but I didn't hear a lot of bad things. And that was also one of the reasons why I wanted to work with you guys.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of got in touch with you and I was like, this is a company that's pretty cool. These guys are doing cool things. They have great artists. And they're trying to do something interesting here. And I want to be a part of it, Yeah. So, yeah.
But I had a conversation with an artist a couple of days ago. And he's at a point where like he's been really happy with the collaboration. Of course, at Capella we don't only focus on artists, but that's been sort of our starting point, and we're working on structuring the company, and you guys will hear about it in a few months. But we very much work with artists. But he was like, I need to take a break working with you guys. He really enjoyed the work until now, and he's also earning a good amount of money. But because of like, there's some things in the structure of what you're doing that's just not clear enough. And I just need to make sure that I myself understand fully what you guys are doing. And the reason why I'm saying this in the podcast is, even though we're growing, we're winning at many aspects, and I would say we're clever and good at what we do. We also need to pay the price for previous mistakes and give ourselves the time to fix up on them in order for the people's perception of our work to match our actual current work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And, I'm just going to voluntarily tell a bit more about myself in that regard. Is I am a person who loves novel things, new things, and I have a very hard time staying interested when things get normal.
Yeah.
Which is amazing if you have a venture studio, which this is becoming, because, I can put my whole heart into new projects and new founders and train them and have vision and see synergies and everything that's challenging and hard, I love it. But with things like, okay, now we put in system and processes and do this over and over again and make sure that the clients and customers and artists are happening, I need to draw myself back. Which means previously I've put myself too central in a lot of relationships where, because of my almost obsessive need for novel things, need to draw a bit out of. It could be an artist where I've been a very close part of the A&R team. But when this becomes, then we build this over time and I draw up and focus my energy in somewhere else, then this artist is confused. Like, so where are you now? I'm still happy with, the other person I'm talking with, but you've been here from the start and now you're not. So what's the issue? And that's been my whole life, is I have let people down because I get bored. That's what we're working with right now, because in that way of working, which is very not optimal for most aspects of life, there's some very, very sickly good qualities. And that is being very, very good at understanding what happens next. But the company can't be built around me alone to any degree. And we're trying to find the wisdom right now, like, how much can I be a part of a new process without making me the center of the relationship?
Yeah. Well, again, and I'm kind of swearing in church for you now, but that would require a structure. So you're kind of it's kind of the you're because I know what you're saying, in the sense that you need to be in an environment that constantly kind of challenges you. And if it becomes too predictable, too structured, then it becomes boring. I'm the same way, by the way. So for me, it's like it's the same thing. I can get very intense when I'm sitting down with people. If there's a particular project that has some challenges, or there's something that needs to be created, whatever. Oh my God, I'll sit down and I'll be super intense and super do it and dedicated and all that stuff. But once it's kind of been done with, I move on to the next thing. I don't want to. I'm not too heavy into the whole following through with that project after everything is safe and structured and it's going automated. But is this something that you're kind of looking for right now? For example, when we have some new people at Capella and all that stuff, this must have been in your mind when you're looking for these people.
What I'm figuring out now is it tends to be the best leaders are people who are opposite me. When it comes to consistent leadership. So I would say people who have the opposite qualities of mine, in general, are the best people to manage things. So I would say I'm the opposite of a manager. And I would also say that I'm not a very qualified CEO outside of the context of this, because I am obsessed with the music industry. I'm obsessed with entrepreneurship. I like music. But I'm obsessed with it, and that makes me good because I know so much. But I'm not good alone, if that makes sense. So I think in any other corporate setting, I would be a terrible CEO. Because, most of the expectations of a traditional CEO is structure and reporting and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Unless you're in a creative startup mentality kind of thing, and I'm not comparing myself to these guys at all, but I'm much closer to like a Steve Jobs personality than I am to a Equinor, oil gas person.
Yeah. So that's the thing, because you're a creator. You create things, and then others manage what you've created.
Yeah.
That's basically it, in a sense.
That's basically it, but that is difficult to do. Because then you also need to outsource, I would say the most important part of a business is, yes, you've started a car, let's keep it running.
Yeah.
So I would say my job is easier than the other people's job in some sense. I'm not saying other people could do my job, but I would say it doesn't require the same level of consistency. And I might just be wrong about it. So, I'm still on a journey, but what I've done right is I've created a company that's centered around my lack of qualities.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Because I know what I'm strong at, and I'm really strong at those things.
Yeah.
So I've managed to create a company around the things I miss, and I think that's the only thing that enables me to be a CEO right now.
Yeah. I think so too. But it's gonna be interesting to kind of the way forward, because Capella is kind of going in a direction right now where we're doing new things, and not necessarily new things, but we're kind of, as you say, we're learning from our mistakes and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see the road going forward. What would you is and I'm not sure if I can ask this, but that's why I want to ask it.
Go for it.
Where is Capella in 5 years?
I don't know specifically where will it be, and the reason why I'm saying that is Capella now is vastly different what it was 1.5 years ago, and we have a different understanding of ourselves now than we had 6 months ago. So I don't have enough foresight to know, but what I think will be is we'll be a company that's earning more money than it spends, that has a power to enable founders to build stuff in our ecosystem, and have successfully launched multiple companies and artist careers into the world. I definitely believe that's where we are. The size of that and the impact of that and the speciality and focus, I'm not sure. But my primary goal with this company right now is giving us time. And what I mean by that is we're a company that spends more money than we earn. We've started to earn, I would say, like significant amounts of money for like a new startup. But of course, we're spending more, which pretty much any startup would approach. But I'm going to stay in this company for the next 20, 25 years. And because this is everything I wanted it to be. It is it's my playground.
Yeah.
And if I can come to a place where we as a company earn more money than we spend, then we, by definition, have no runway or burn rate, which basically means we can continue over time. And if you give this team time, I believe in time, we'll create several things that are great, that then will create the success.
But because when you're talking, what is a little bit fascinating or interesting about this conversation is that you seem very self-reflective, which is uncommon, I would say, because at least in the people in my life that I've met, to like communicate and actually talk about yourself in such an objective way. Where does that come from? Is that trained? Has it always been like that? Have you always?
It comes from trauma.
Yeah.
Had some, let's call it, wild experiences with extreme charismatic church that left me, in my own words, to some degree brainwashed, and struggled with that for a few years, and realized when I was 20 that the way that I look at myself is something that I've been indoctrinated with, that is having real life consequences and is not positive to any extent. So I've been on a 10-year journey pulling apart what that was. And I've obviously spoken to a lot of people, some therapists, a lot of mentors, and a lot to my wife, who is really freaking smart and sharp. And then I'm talking a lot to myself. So I have conversations with myself. And so I've spent 10 years trying to figure out how much was I brainwashed, and to what degree. And that leaves you have continuously asking yourself questions about yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty big claim to say you've been brainwashed.
Self-criticism or self-doubt?
Self-evaluation. I don't criticize myself. I don't doubt myself. The reason why I don't criticize myself is the approach I have to myself is a word that I've really started using in 2023 is the word grace, which is basically understanding and forgiving real time. So when I do a mistake or if I do something wrong, I'm like, I recognize that was wrong. I recognize that was a mistake. I'm going to change it, but I'm not going to hit myself in the head right now because I'm on a journey. So that's how it works for me. So it's more self-evaluation than anything. It continuously evaluating my own moves and my own thoughts. And one of the things that I say that is maybe slightly arrogant is when people give me criticism, which I really welcome, is like, you most likely can't say anything about me I haven't thought myself. Because I'm continuously in a self-evaluation process. It doesn't make me right. It just, I at least give myself the time to think about my actions.
You know your lacks and you know your strengths in a way.
And I'm in active mode of receiving that information from myself or others.
Yeah, but this kind of these kind of conversations, because right now we're sitting in a context where you and I are speaking at a podcast.
Yeah.
I
forgot that for a second.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of becomes a little bit like that, you know, when the conversation hits deep and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, now we're sitting in one of the studios here at Elefant, which is Capella is administrating, and is it why this podcast? And I'm sure that you've probably given some insight to listeners before on this as to why you're doing this, but you know what up in all of this with Capella going on and everything, why take these put this out, why set up these things? There's
some outspoken reasons, and then there's some hidden reasons that I'll make non-hidden. Well, people can figure that out themselves, but the obvious reasons, which are the public reasons, are that we want to create a space where entrepreneurs can learn about the music industry with an entrepreneurship narrative. Reason number one. Reason number two is we want to brand ourselves as a company that is outspoken about this area, because we work with founders to build companies in the music industry.
Yeah.
The most powerful reason is not the one I'm public with, and that is two reasons. There's one that I get an excuse to have conversations with thought leaders and entrepreneurs where they can have a friendly tone with me and like me.
Yeah, I get it.
And the second unspoken reason is that I'm positioning my own brand in association with other people's brands that positively affect how people in the industry perceive me. So that's 4 different reasons. And I think they're all good. And I don't think there's anything wrong in being outspoken about the personal reasons as well. If anything, that's a pretty entrepreneurial thing to do.
Yeah.
Which is what this podcast is about.
Yeah.
And so for me, the podcast in itself is an entrepreneurship journey that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, it's cool, man. And I don't know, just like already with all the guests and all that stuff, it's a very giving experience, at least because music industry isn't exactly known for entrepreneurship in that sense. It's been like, at least the environments, at least, is not as encouraging to think in those manners. Because even though, which is ironic, because it's an industry that is created by creatives, and we create music, and we make music, and we want to push the limits, we want to do all of these things. But at the same time, you're not. It's kind of like this little fishbowl, and you're free to roam around this fishbowl, but don't you dare start questioning the fishbowl. Yeah, in a sense, am I touching upon it and a little bit of the challenge there, or?
Yeah, I'm definitely frustrated with the music industry. Like, I'm frustrated with many people in general, but every single thing that we've done with Capella and with my adventures before Capella, I've needed to fight for every single bit of it. And yes, I've gotten help, but only gotten help when I've asked for it continuously and annoyingly. And every single person I think it's changing now. People are getting more helpful out of their own, because they recognize what we do and like, okay, I want to be a part of that or helping them. So I think people are being much more generous with their time. But until this point, it's just I needed to fight for every single thing, and there was nothing given. And I think that's really frustrating because, like, why? Why not, as an industry, be more generous to new people? Why do you need to be? Why do you need to sacrifice 5 years of your career with no pay? Well, because you need to build everything from scratch. You're not going to get any help.
Yeah, I would chime in there and also say that the music industry is also a very high risk, high reward industry. It's not a place where people are maybe used to, having a mediocre salary with a mediocre work and all that type of stuff. As artists, I would say, I'm taking it from the artist perspective. It's all about chasing that excellence and innovacy, and everything has to be unique and everything, which I personally do. I'm attracted to. I like that. I like uniqueness, and I like that. But it creates challenges, as you say, where you kind of have to suffer a lot and take a lot of risks, and for a potential reward that might never come.
It most likely will never come.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sad thing, and that's what I want to be a part of changing. Because at the end of the day, I want to do something different because I wasn't given it. And the music industry is a high risk, high reward, yes, but it's also hierarchy. And I think that's sad. I think hierarchy is there for a reason. But when you don't do anything proactive to reach down below your level out of not a egotistical, this needs to benefit me, my sentence is messing up. I think that needs to be a part of the music industry. And that's something that we're focusing on, is like, who can we proactively give chances and reach out to in order to do something and pursue their dream?
But yeah, I think I agree to some degree, but I also disagree a little bit, because one of the things that I have learned with doing music is that it builds the industry is kind of created in such a way that it almost filters out the people who are not willing to really suffer for it. Because it requires so much extra, and as you say, nobody's here to help you. You have to do it on your own. You have to start out on your own. You have to hustle, and you have to do it, and you have to push it out, and you have to work and stay up late and all that type of stuff. And then once things start coming in, then things becomes a little bit more easier to tangle. But I think for me, it's also a character development, and it's a journey of character development, But if I understand, but maybe I misunderstood you. I'm not,
no, you're not misunderstanding me. But the comment I have to that is, sometimes the most risk-willing people who is able to take the most pain are also that because they're the stupidest, like they're most stupid. And the people a lot of the people who are really clever is like, no, why would I put myself through 5 years of hell in order to achieve something that's going to be mediocre in the end?
Yeah.
So my approach to this is, yes, for my case, I needed to struggle to build a character. But in most cases, the clever people just won't do that risk because they have better opportunities somewhere else. That's the part of being clever. Figure out, like, is this worth it? No. Then I won't do it.
Yeah.
So if I can make a place that's going to be more worth it, I believe the people who are the best fitting for the job maybe want to pursue it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, you have examples of people approaching that method, but doing it smart. Doing it smartly, because they are smart people, and they know, and exactly what you're saying. They understand that. Listen, man, I'm not gonna, spend 5 years slaving around someplace and not getting anything for it or whatever. So I agree with you there.
Yeah.
But there are also people, I think the people who understand how the music industry is, and they understand the challenges of it and are smart. They understand that, listen, man, I have to do something a little bit different. I want to go through the process, but I'm going to make sure that my ass is covered, in a sense, while doing it. And you have many examples of those people as well. And basically all that I'm saying is that in a very challenging, competitive, and unfair environment, a lot of times you also get the personalities or the people that really are excellent because they're able to kind of, I would say, confront those challenges and come out in a good sense. But again, it's I know it's a very kind of black and white thing to.
But how many excellent people do you need? Because when you're excellent, there's always a balance in life.
Yeah.
So if you have a lot of
everyone is excellent, nobody's excellent. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but to some degree, but also like if you're excellent, you're gonna have so big faults as well. Like I believe I'm pretty excellent at what I do, and I have huge things that I don't have covered. I don't need a lot of those people, please. Thank you. I would like to have great people who, across the line, are doing a good job. Like those section of people, give me one or two, but please not more. It's going to be too much work. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, I guess what you mean.
So the exceptional people you're talking about, yes, it's good. Maybe I consider myself one of them in my line of work, and considering what I'm doing at my age and where I've come. But I don't need another me right now.
Yeah.
I need someone who can meet up to work, do a great job, deliver on time, be smile about it, and do their homework, and deliver results.
Yeah.
And I don't think they need to struggle for 5 years to get there. They can just do a great education, work hard at school, have a positive attitude, and go get a good salary.
Yeah.
Isn't that?
No.
That's where I want to. That's where I want to be.
It's a very great vision, and I definitely think that it's absolutely achievable.
And what's so stupid, right? We're talking about it right now, but in other industries, people coming not from industries like, are they guys just talking about job? Like,
yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Yeah.
So I believe, and it sounds almost stupid, but it's not intuitive for the music industry. I believe if the music industry can be a bit closer to what it is to be in any other industry, we do so much better.
Yeah.
So I understand where you come from.
Yeah.
And that is the music industry narrative and the artist struggling narrative. I just believe it's an exaggerated narrative.
Yeah.
That helps us accept our own very not optimal situation.
Yeah. No, that might be true. It might be true. It might be true. Yeah, it might be true. Because I mean, like from a personal experience, when you're saying that you kind of have to chase people down, and you kind of have to, build something yourself, because not a lot of people are there to help you, or the system is not necessarily there in place to kind of support you and so forth. I experienced that as well, and it creates a lot of frustrations. It really does. So I understand the frustration. But for me, what I've learned a little bit over the years is that because instead of sitting at home and saying, this is so frustrating, it's impossible, I said, okay, if I'm going to have to do it myself, then I'm going to have to do it myself, and I kept doing that for some time. And it was tiresome, and it was frustrating at some time, but at a certain point, it kind of made me into who I am today in terms of like skill sets and in terms of how to approach issues and challenges, because I've been through them before, and I've done it myself in a sense. So I'm not necessarily talking about like money or the benefits of jobs and so forth. I'm talking more about the character development of the person.
My argument is that can be built other places. That is more secure.
Yeah, sure.
But it speaks to, and I think it's a good sort of place to also round up the episode. Is it just speaks to, I have a personal agenda based on my personal experiences. And my basic goal, to some degree, is providing opportunities for others that I weren't presented. And it's not out of bitterness. It's more out of I believe that I have made it thus far against the odds, but I don't necessarily appreciate that. I don't think that's a good solution. I think that's been my solution, and I'm happy for my journey. But I don't believe it's a good solution. And at the end of the day, I want to build a good company for good people that I care about.
Yeah.
And if I care about someone, they don't need to go through the shit that I did. They can go through their own shit in their own way, but at least the things that I needed to struggle through for many, many years and get virtually no help from. Let me just provide them that starting point.
And
I have kids now, right?
Yeah.
I want to have them stand on my shoulders with my experiences and the things that my parents gave me an upbringing, and I want to learn from the things that I loved and learn from things that I didn't like, and then give them a hopefully better starting point.
Yeah, it makes absolutely sense.
So it's no different. Hey, but thank you for being a champ and doing this rather narcissistic episode. But again, I think it's important that if people are fans of the podcast over time, that they understand a bit more where I come from. And I think they'll definitely understand snippets by just listening to the podcast. But hopefully this gives those few, maybe 2 people that care about me a way to learn a bit more about me.
Yeah, and I mean it's been an interesting experience for me as well, to kind of pick your brain a little bit, challenge you a little bit, and ask you questions, and because it's like we're working closely together.
Yeah.
So it's great. So thank you for the opportunity to sit here and fulfill the narcissistic episode.
Yes.
But all right, guys. Pleasure, and watch the. Okay, fuck. Now we're done.